Okay, so we'll kick off. Hello and welcome to our webinar. I'm Cronan McNamara, founder and CEO of Creme Global. I'm based here in Dublin, Ireland, where we're recording. Creme Global is a data science company, and we're using AI and trusted science to safeguard reputations and protect consumers using data and predictive analytics. Our mission is to enable better decision making in this complex world we live in around food safety, using science and data, and we deploy our own secure data analysis and visualization and machine learning and scientific modeling platform and system for our partners and clients to use. So in today's webinar, we'll be discussing the 12 factors affecting food safety as we quickly come to the end of 2024 and start thinking about 2025. As you're all very familiar, food safety is shaped by a complex web of factors, many of which have evolved significantly in recent years. So it's a good time to take stock and think about, these major factors affecting food safety. And in particular, in Creme Global, we believe that data collection, data sharing, and predictive analytics can play a critical role in addressing these challenges and providing the insights that are needed to enhance food safety on a global level. So we're talking today about those factors, but also how data and leveraging data-driven approaches can help stakeholders anticipate risks, respond to emerging risks, and ensure that our food systems remain safe and resilient, and the food supply is safe for consumers. Brendan Ring will join me for a Q&A. Brendan is Creme Global's commercial director, who's leading the charge in industry engagement around these topics and around providing solutions using data and analytics to these problems. Brendan will join me for Q&A at the end, and we'd be very interested in your own comments and views. So please do enter your questions or comments at any time during the webinar on the Q&A panel on your system. So we've organized the food safety factors into 4 major themes, as you can see here on the screen. And we'll bring this up in the end again, and I'd be really curious to know which topics you find are the most impactful on food safety and which ones potentially data has the most potential to mitigate. So we have the 4 major themes here: climate and environment, of course, global supply chain, people and habits, and emerging risks. And I'm going to go through all of these one by one over those 4 big themes. So please do, let us know your thoughts as we progress. So let's kick on with the first major theme. Of course, we all know that climate and environment has a huge impact on food production and food safety. And in this particular topic, I'm going to go through a few factors within this theme. And we want to talk in particular about how data can help us in these things. First of all, climate change. We all know that climate change is a massive issue around the world for many reasons. But in terms of food production, it has potential to disrupt crop production, and it creates new conditions in different regions of the world that may or may not increase the proliferation of new pests and hazards. It can cause flooding, which is always a huge risk for contamination of water supplies and the soil. It stresses the food production system, reducing yield, putting pressure on the food system, and likelihood then for different problems to arise. So we're all very, very aware of these challenges. So in terms of what data can do and what we believe we're doing in terms of data collection, data analytics to try to help with this particular thing. Of course, better data collection can enhance forecasting models. So looking at data on weather patterns, on product yields, on product testing, on water testing, on production systems inspections, and combining all of these data sets can actually help produce systems that can provide insights for growers and producers of food products around early warning and risks that may come down the line based on new weather forecasts or based on different weather conditions. Also then, sharing that data can improve that insight across the region. If you can share information, you can learn from each other's data and provide that big data that's needed to train up AI models. So another aspect of the environment is that there's a huge demand now for organic product and sustainable product. And these farming practices have grown in popularity due to consumer demand and due to the desire for healthier and cleaner products. While these organic practices are environmentally friendly, they do provide or pose potential food safety hazards. Organic products and foods, of course, are grown without synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, which therefore can increase the likelihood or risk of contamination from different sources, like the animal manure, etc. So there are regulations around organic certification and sustainability, and they're being tightened. But what can we do with data around this? And again, it's similar to the previous one. We need to collect data on the whole food production system, from grower, water sampling, product testing in the field, in the production system, and sharing that data again, gathering better data on those organic farming methods, combined with testing of soil, testing of water, can mitigate risk around the product life cycle. Sharing that data and sharing knowledge around best practice can also help reduce the chances of potential outbreaks that can compromise or the safety without harming sustainability of the organic products. So these data and metrics can be gathered from the grower and from the producer, from the retailer, to help identify the right practices that are both eco-friendly and safe for human consumption, of course, and productive and commercially viable, which is very important too. Moving on to green chemistry. Green chemistry is the design of chemical products and processes that reduce or eliminate the use or generation of hazardous substances. And again, green chemistry is gaining traction in food production, particularly in packaging and preservatives, food packaging. And while it's very positive for the environmental aspect, it can pose new challenges around safety. So there's need for thorough data and science to look at these risks. So what can data do on this front? Well, data on the safety profile of these new green chemicals needs to be risk assessed from a toxicity and an exposure point of view. And that has to happen, of course. And then as these chemicals are used in production, either for food additives or packaging, data on the effectiveness and safety of these new innovations can be gathered and shared within industry and with government. Data and models can decrease innovation time, and it's important to look at things like shelf life and potential shelf lives of these new packaging types and to ensure that the shelf life is sufficient for food safety. Finally, on number 4 for the environment and climate section, extreme weather events. And we touched on this earlier with climate change, but when we have a huge buildup of different types of weather in different regions, and we've seen it all too often this year, extreme weather events like hurricanes and floods and droughts have happened this year and are destined to happen going forward. We're going to see more livestock and crops being destroyed, transportation networks disrupted, leading to delay, and of course food safety hazards. So what can we do on this? Again, more data can be collected on weather systems to help predict extreme events. Also coupled with risk assessments around logistics, which we're going to come back to, in order to minimize the impact of logistical disruption in transport, etc. So again, that's our climate environment theme, and it'd be great to hear your thoughts on how data is helping and how it can help going forward. So moving on to a different theme now, we're calling people and habits. This is the second major theme, and we want to see how these changes and changes going into 2025 can impact on food safety and how data can help us in this region. This is a really fascinating one on organizational culture, and especially the organizational culture of food production establishments. So, of course, the culture within organizations can directly influence food safety. It can also influence productivity and efficiency of operations. And growing attention on the link between culture and safety has been demonstrated in the scientific literature and in books and in research. So there's always attention on corporate responsibility and more traceability, transparency and accountability of organizations. And we believe that organizational culture has a huge role to play in food safety. So what can we do with data? Well, we can use data to diagnose and do audits of organizational culture. And within massive organizations, that can be broken down by the particular region or by the particular set of operations within an organization. So data from staff surveys and public sources can be used to diagnose the culture of an organization. That can allow real-time data sharing within that organization around strengths and weaknesses of different parts of the organization in terms of culture and food safety. It can help you then go in and make interventions to improve the culture and improve food safety, and the side effects will be improved productivity, profitability, and efficiency of your organization as well. So linking those, thinking about the link between how you use data to understand and help improve your culture of your organization can improve the food safety capabilities and protect the consumer. We've all learned so much about personal hygiene over the last number of years since the pandemic. It has a lasting impact on personal safety practices, and it's, new habits are good that are translated into industry. And of course, hygiene practices are improving, but in many processing and retail environments, lapses in food personal hygiene can cause food safety contamination issues. So how can we use data? Well, there are different technologies and tools for tracking personal hygiene compliance through systems and collecting data in the production environment around data on hygiene and food safety behaviors and practices. Sharing those data within your industry group or within your own organization and linking it to different risks that actually occur if you're testing your product, you can then learn how to make sure that those food safety risks won't continue to happen. Number 7 out of our 12 factors is this major one here around consumer habits and changing demand. So consumer habits are constantly changing with a desire for more diverse foods, alternative proteins, different cuisines, and exotic products from all over the world, putting pressure on the supply chain to provide all of these different ingredients and food products at all times of the year, all over the world. So how do we understand this data, this consumer habits and changing data and changing demand using data? We need to understand it because these evolving consumer trends can often outpace the food production system, leaving them with a lag and a shortage of different ingredients. And that can provide a critical risk around a huge shortage or a huge price spike in various ingredients, which then can lead over to all sorts of problems like food fraud and food safety. So what can we do with data to try to inform us around habits and changing demand? Well, of course, we can gather data or investigate existing public data sources on food consumption, like the NHANES survey in the United States, and we can try to ascertain as much information on trends and consumer habits and practices in the food industry as possible to anticipate those shifts. And using that data, then we can forecast demand for ingredients down the line and help us to plan ahead and to produce the ingredients and the product that's needed. And often there can be a multi-year lag time between when you plant a crop and when it's ready for harvest. So we do need to plan ahead, and data and AI can help us forecast demand based on trends and based on consumer demand. And also data and AI can facilitate faster new product development in the industrial setting by short-circuiting the R&D cycle using predictive analytics on, ingredient to recipe to sensory output and shelf life. So have a think about that, and we have some case studies on that we'd like to share in the Q&A. Our third major theme, our 3 out of 4, is going to be the global supply chain and how that impacts food safety and how we can use data to help mitigate the risk of it. So the first factor within the global supply chain is shipping route disruption. We did touch on this earlier, but we're seeing disruption to shipping routes that are caused by human error in like the blockage of the Suez Canal or else natural disasters, which often will lead to delays in food deliveries, leading to spoilage and potential pathogen growth within those products, which is a huge food safety hazard. So what we're doing with data around this is implementing real-time data tracking on shipping routes within containers, and delivery times then can be predicted, and the conditions within the containers can be monitored in real time using IoT devices for things like temperature, humidity, and time in those different types of environment. And if things get delayed and a shipping container takes more time than is expected to reach its destination, we can use algorithms to predict potential disruption hazards on that product, and prioritize certain shipments for inspection, and pass other shipments for less priority of inspection based on data and science and predictive analytics. So using the real-time IoT data and science and predictive analytics, we can increase the chances of finding any problems in these shipping containers at different ports of arrival, and we can make it more efficient and reduce the friction within that process and enable more efficiency and better safety. And this relates to this one about regulation and cross-border standards. Of course, when you're shipping product around the world, you have to comply with border controls and standards. And differences in these national food safety standards can create complexity for food industry. There can also be different requirements from different buyers, which are superseding the national standards. And various organizations like Codex Alimentarius are working on setting different benchmarks to provide a coherent framework, and then government and trade organizations are also trying to harmonize food safety standards. Aligning these can help exporters to comply more easily with regulations, and again reduce the friction around producing and shipping product around the world and increasing food safety. So how can data help with this? Well, data is vital for enhancing these regulations, and regulations need to be science-based and data-based, so that everybody can understand what's required, and those standards are set in a scientific way of risk assessment. Data enables a lot of comprehensive analysis, and what we're seeing the potential for data to do is moving from a document sharing system at the port of entry or within the shipping container to a constant data sharing system to facilitate and reduce the friction in international trade. So if producers in one region can share data on their facilities around safety, testing, inspections, etc., then their product can be prioritized for international shipping and trade, and have less friction on the journey, and less inspections, and improved food safety at the same time. Finally, on this supply chain issue, we're talking about the supply chain itself. So regulations around food traceability have become a major focus in response to global supply chain disruption. Global food supply chains have become increasingly complex, involving so many stakeholders. Product moves around to be processed, and disruptions such as the pandemic and geopolitical conflicts have often exposed vulnerabilities in that supply chain. And when that happens, the risk of counterfeit product or lower quality product being shipped or being shipped too long is going to increase the risk of food safety. So again, moving back to the solution of data, real-time tracking of food products from farm to fork, so digitizing that supply chain, allowing for real-time tracking of those products. And if any contamination or safety breaches are detected, that data should be anonymized and shared around the supply chain, so that all players can understand what the risk profile is from different regions, different products, and different categories. And sharing on this kind of data on food fraud or food safety has been hugely successful in a number of projects, and we're going to touch on one of those, which is the Fin project in the UK. So finally, on to the last major theme, which we're calling emerging risks. So we have two more factors to go through. The first one is this major challenge of our time, which seems to be war, famine, and politics. So political instability and war is causing famine and displacement of people, and impacting on global food safety and global food supply. These conflicts are disrupting supply chains, creating food shortages, and reducing the capacity of regions to maintain safe product and food supplies, and those products are traded internationally. So these tensions are leading to shifts in exports and imports, often disrupting safety and the food supply. So again, data sharing, we believe, is a huge part of the solution to this. Helping organizations gather, aggregate, and share data across borders can help track food safety in these zones and identify more better alternatives if disruption happens. Of course, major these global sharing agreements can help harmonize the food safety standards, and data from inspections and test supports can provide early warning systems. And if that data is aggregated and visualized, everybody can learn from it and respond appropriately to those safety concerns. So finally, in the last factor, we're talking here about new emerging risks, pathogens. And of course, we've seen over the last number of years the emergence of new viruses and bacteria that are resistant to traditional food safety methods, the evolution of pathogens like Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella, and things like the avian flu have continued to pose challenges around food safety and food security. So again, continuous surveillance, what we can do with data is continuous surveillance and genetic data collection on these pathogens, where you can swab and sample and use advanced techniques like the 16S RNA analysis, and we can swab and analyze this data using data analytics and machine learning to actually understand the environment and the microbiome of the product itself or of an environment. This can provide a lot more insight than traditional pathogen culture tests can offer, and can provide a predictive opportunity to see when microbiomes are becoming risky and then mitigate those risks and reduce or eliminate the potential of a food safety outbreak. So in summary, those are our 12 factors, and I'm going to bring them up again in a moment so we can have them on screen. I'd like you to think about which you find to be the most important and send in your comments or questions, and Brendan and I will have a discussion on that ourselves in a minute. We have some questions in already, I see. So we've seen that food safety is a worldwide challenge that is shaped by a complex web of factors, many of which evolve and change over time, and we expect that to continue into 2025. We've also shown that a theme around a data solution is often data collection, data aggregation, sharing, and predictive analytics can play a critical role across a lot of those factors in helping address those challenges and provide the insights that are needed to either mitigate the risk or foresee the risk and prevent it in the first place. Leveraging those data-driven approaches, stakeholders can anticipate risk, respond to emerging threats, and ensure that our food systems remain safe and resilient. So here are those 12 up on one screen again within the 4 themes. We've also seen throughout this talk that the changing face of regulation is playing a critical role in food safety, and by addressing these challenges and responding to evolving technologies and consumer demands is going to take a lot more insight and data. So as regulations become more complex, data becomes even more essential, and efficient data collection and data sharing can actually mitigate risk and help regulators and inspectors to optimize their resources and find those challenges within their imports and within the products in their supply chain. So we're going to move on to question and answers. Brendan's going to join me now. Welcome, Brendan. As I mentioned earlier, Brendan is our commercial director here at Creme Global with a lot of experience of discussing these challenges with industry. And it's great to have you here. We're here in Dublin. It's a cloudy and cold December day. But so firstly, let's keep an eye on the Q&A on the screen here. I see one here already. Before I jump in with that one, I'd just like to ask you, which of these major factors, Brendan, jumped out at you as, the most impactful food safety challenges going into 2025?
Thanks, Cronan. Yeah, delighted to be here. Well done on the travel through those and that journey. Quite a lot covered there in a short space of time. Good job. I guess the one that jumped out at me and it kind of relates to one of the projects there that you mentioned on the Fin project. So Fin, the Food Industry Intelligence Network, they've really set the gold standard in how industry can share data to get insight. And I know there's some of the Fin members online there. Hello to them.
Hello, everyone.
So yeah, in that vanilla actually is quite an interesting case study. Years ago, people grew vanilla on trees and harvest them, and that was fine. Then synthetic vanilla came along, and there was a move to a much cheaper option, and people sowed less trees. And then with clean label, which you mentioned, changing consumer habits, that started to drive a move towards natural vanilla. However, there's a 3-year lead time to plant trees, so there was a supply demand issue. So again, a supply chain issue. Then, unfortunately, cyclone Anawo came through Madagascar, which produces 80% of the of vanilla, and wiped out the crop essentially. So again, adverse weather played into all of that. The challenge then was a massive shortage. Prices spiked. Actually, I think they're up to like $600 per kg, which is the equivalent of silver.
Yeah.
So ripe for fraud, ripe for adulteration, ripe for for people to take advantage of that. So so as a product in the food system, how that can be influenced from a food safety perspective. You see all of those factors that came through. But I guess where Fin plays a role in that then is, there's about 60 companies in Fin all across the supply chain. They share their inspection data. So quite confidential, sensitive data. So they share that, and we use that to get the wisdom of the crowd from that. So all of those people in the supply chain can get access to that data. So really have to commend Fin in terms of the approach that it took for that. It's really a gold standard approach. So
yeah, it's a great project, and sharing those insights where one company can detect a potential issue in their supply chain, which wouldn't be apparent to anybody else if they didn't share that. The knowledge would not be available to the whole industry. So it's a great success, and they built a great data trust there where they're analyzing the data on a regular basis and sharing those insights. So kudos to the Fin project on really using data and visualization of risks. So that's that one kind of did cover nearly all aspects from changing consumer. So I think the key point is detecting these consumer changes early, trying to forecast them, and then being prepared by getting the crops planted in good time. So that's often a couple of year lead time. So you have to really try to forecast it.
So that's, I guess, where you can start using, these, massive data sets and looking at consumer trends, looking at climate change, looking at, what's happening in the broader ecosystem. AI obviously changing the game here as well in terms of being able to do this predictive analysis and, see, all of these multivariate factors, how they all come together and, what's going to be the next version of this. You can never... There's, one thing's for certain is there's always going to be disruption of some type. It's ever present, but it's also unpredictable. So, having being able to address and manage that, you never, leaders don't get penalized for, not knowing something was coming up. It's how you react to that, and do you have the tools in place to be able to react to that. So that's what we've seen from working with
maybe
industry.
In the future they'll have to be able to predict as well.
Maybe, if you're not using AI,
you have to be predicting what's coming up. So that's interesting. So following on that theme, what do you think maybe the next big changes happening in food safety going into next year and beyond?
I did touch, I guess, build on some of the things that you presented there. The food supply chain, it's a 2 trillion business. It's an absolutely enormous, vastly interconnected ecosystem. However, there's still quite a bit of friction in that, in terms of the supporting documentation and all of the data. There isn't a digital twin right now of that, in particular in the shipping industry. So actually, you can look back to the 1500s, and it's still the same, more or less the same bill of lading that's used. Which is, it's so that industry is so ripe for disruption. The aviation industry has embraced digital documentation, digital validation, or digital. Yeah. So I think there's an opportunity here for data for that industry to actually leapfrog and go right up to real time data sharing. So IoT, you mentioned there in the presentation. So temperature, humidity sensing, but feeding that data into a real time AI model that's constantly monitoring the food safety of the product in that shipment. And then, now, in terms of that, gives customs and border inspection the opportunity to have advance notice as to what in the ship that's coming in, what's happening, which containers can we green light, which ones can we, do we need to hold for inspection, which ones do we alert before it even has come into dock,
turn them around maybe,
and turn them around and say this, so it's, so the efficiency.
Know what's going on, and you can learn a lot from the aviation sector in terms of, like, everyone talks about their openness to sharing when an incident happens. So that's actually what the Western growers are trying to do with GreenLink, is get that culture of a positive result is something to be shared, and obviously anonymized and shared. It doesn't matter who got the result. It's more a matter of what happened, what the root cause analysis can you learn from it. So we have another question, and it came in from, thank you very much for that. It says, is labor a concern for 2025? And I guess that might relate to the agricultural space.
Well, that's a good example. We work closely with the growers, agricultural crop growers, West Coast US. So Salinas Valley, called the Garden of the US, in terms of, I think 80% of fresh produce comes out of there. So labor there is a real challenge in terms of, how do you get enough staff in the right place at the right time to harvest this, very dynamic crop, and then, move all of that then into the desert into Arizona, during the winter time. So, from a food safety perspective, how you look at that, again, being able to understand what are the sources of risk, within that whole ecosystem. Really, again, credit to the Western Growers team and to the growers themselves. And, they're sharing, they've really set the gold standard in sharing data between competitors for the benefit of the whole, their whole ecosystem, but more so for food safety, and for the population. Everybody loses when there's a food safety issue.
And you're thinking about shortage of experienced people, how you train them, maybe digital technologies for training. We talked about culture and instilling that food safety culture and personal hygiene. So definitely, perhaps one to add to our people slides going forward. Labor shortages and
challenges around that.
Great stuff. We have another question come in, and thank you for that, from Carrie. Carrie Rigdon.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, good to hear from you. What ways do you see the EU's recent sustainability regulations dovetailing with these 12 factors? There's probably an overlap with a few. Do you think these regulations will accelerate the use of data for mitigating risk of some of these factors? That's a tricky one there. So, do you have any thoughts on that? I'll have a think while you're speaking.
So I guess you mentioned it, you touched on it there in the presentation in terms of green chemistry and of exposure. Is a key area here, and when you look at risk, risk is made up of the hazard and the exposure. So when there's changes to what is allowed to be used, or there's various products being brought off the market, actually, you really need to have detailed usage data, so you can do good exposure analysis, because it can actually lead to a concentration of other chemicals being used, and like the famous saying of that, like, everything is a poison, it just depends on the dose. So really understanding, that's why exposure is such a critical and important part of that. And usage data, is and essentially what usage data, just to explain a little bit more on that. So once you understand what concentration of a chemical or product or whatever is being used in all different food types, and then you merge that then with the consumption habits of a population of a country, then you can build up a picture of what is the overall global population consumption for that particular chemical that might be used in multiple different products and consumed in multiple different ways. So data really plays a hugely important part of that. So
like I'm thinking about the slides we had on organics and sustainability, green chemistry, making sure those chemicals are safe, especially that they provide the shelf life needed for products, and testing that. So I know EFSA is a very scientific organization, and they like to back up their regulation or their advice with science. So I would say data will play more and more a role. We did a roadmap on exposure for EFSA recently, and very, very detailed science in that. So it's hard to say. Like, I think covering what we've covered in the organics and sustainability will kind of dovetail with, especially with these EU sustainability regulations. But we'd love to talk more about that at some point in the future. But there's another question, we better move on, and it's about tariffs, which is another topical item on the agenda. So are tariffs going to be a significant 100%. Factor? Absolutely.
Yeah. So we get to talk about supply chain disruption and changes in there's multiple different factors that can cause people to have to change where they supply or source something from. So, it can be a natural disaster that wipes out a crop that drives up the price, or if there's tariffs placed on certain imports, well, the margins in food typically are pretty tight, so you're going to be very sensitive to that. So industry is constantly going to try to be sourcing products from alternative sources, and every time you change a supplier or change a country or change a jurisdiction of where you take something from, it opens up all kinds of risk. The supply chain is already so many steps in, at the opportunity for for people who want to, conduct fraudulent and non-food safety issues. So tariffs are.
I think so. Yeah, any kind of abrupt change like that could increase supplies will have companies like looking for alternatives and using data and science to make sure the alternatives they find are good. So that's a huge data challenge in terms of sharing that data within the industry, and then looking at new product development. We've done a bit of work on that, where you can really fast track new ingredients through your NPD life cycle using predictive models rather than doing it in the lab. So I think there's a lot of potential there, and tariffs will be an interesting thing to watch. Another question from Jeffrey Farber. Thanks, Jeffrey. Hi there. Have there been any discussions or movements underway to try and expand FIN to become a more global project in nature, maybe involving Codex, FAO, WHO, etc.? That's a great question.
It's, I guess, the origins of FIN came around when Chris Elliott wrote a report, but it was the initiative, actually, or the original foresight from a guy called Ron McNaughton. He's in Food Standards Scotland. He's actually an ex-detective from the food squad from Scotland Yard, but he's now working in the Food Safety Authority. But he saw the benefit of how industry sharing data, where regulators are like, okay, we'll facilitate you to share this and to capture this data. There's various different factors built in that facilitates them to do that. But he was really the first regulator to embrace that. Other regulators then came on. Ireland, actually, I think, were next, and UK then as well. So absolutely, there's definitely a strong interest from industry to roll this out globally. The regulators are those that need to be brought on board to ensure that they're comfortable with industry and collecting this data, even though we go through anonymization steps and it's legal privilege and it's incoming data as opposed to product on the market, and its integrity is not food safety. So there's a plethora of things that facilitate that to happen. But we're very interested in facilitating the rollout of that. So we work closely with Camden BRI. They're the project lead, we're the tech lead on it. So
Yeah, I think there's potential to expand it, and it's naturally growing with some even US companies joining, but more with a European focus. It is
Yeah,
quite European centric at the moment. Yeah,
There's quite
but
there's a lot of
global players in it.
multinational
Yeah,
companies
so I
in it,
think
yeah,
it
and
can be
retailers.
expanded through that industry grouping as it is.
Yeah.
I think we're almost out of time, so we'll just wrap up then with any final thoughts and any other interesting projects that you're working on or we're working on in this space.
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered
Yeah.
some of the main ones. Lots of AI is
Mm.
the game changer, I guess, and embracing that, and how I suppose how industry is really going to stay ahead
Yeah.
on that, because if you're not on that journey, you're for sure left behind. The rate of change of innovation
Mm.
because of AI and in AI is like nothing seen before. So it's
Absolutely, yeah.
you need to be part of that race. That's a
Absolutely,
biggie.
yeah. The technologies are really impressive now, and we're using some of the large language models, and we're also deploying them inside our own platform to help our clients benefit from that LLM, those AI, advanced generative AI models.
Generative AI.
And we're also developing kind of mathematical predictive models using AI. So all of that requires data. The bigger the data, the better. So data sharing, data aggregation is very valuable. So I think, hopefully that, their data can inform and help across these 12 factors we discussed today.
Yeah.
There are some challenges, but there's a lot of potential that, if industry and government can organize to gather, structure, and share data, then
Yeah.
using these predictive models can definitely address some of these challenges in the food safety space. So
Yeah, the FDA, the risk prediction engine that they're building, or that we're building with them on the food safety platform, that's really
yeah,
kind of driving the whole industry forward. They really
yeah.
have done some fantastic work. Huge credit to that team.
WGA similar with the
Yeah,
Greenlink project. So yeah,
yeah.
there's great progress being made. So keep watch this space for updates, and thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to wrap it up there. Have a great afternoon, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks very much.